In this video, I want to start with some simple lambdas. We will repeat a bit what we already saw in the previous videos, and then we will have a look at more complex lambdas which use if-else, for example. So our first lambda, it increases the value of x. So you can call it, for example, with an integer. Remember, the PEP style guide says that you shouldn't assign lambdas, but now just to test them, we do it. In general, you shouldn't do it. So the first output is the one of our L1 lambda, and as you see, it works as expected. We have one parameter after the keyword, then we have the colon, and here is the expression, what the lambda does. A lambda has one line always, remember, and it's an anonymous function. You could also write that as a regular function with the def keyword and so on. You shouldn't make a lambda too long, actually. Just you use it just for short functions, for keywords of built-in functions. For example, for the key function, we saw that with the max and min function, for example. There's also a video here on YouTube if you didn't see it yet. So keep them short in general and don't assign them. If you want to use them repeatedly, use a regular function. Okay, now we could also pass a float value here. The lambda still works as expected. But of course, if we enter, for example, a string, it will crash. So this lambda works for numbers only. The next one also, you see, again, we have one parameter, x, and we square it. We multiply it with itself. So here we can also pass numbers to this lambda and we get back a number. What does L3 do? Take a second to think what will be the return values type. So now I show you. Again, we call L3, for example, with 5, and it returns true. And if we call it with 0, we get back false. So this lambda returns Boolean values, true or false, and it checks if the given value here in x is bigger than 3, then it returns true. If not, it returns false. And of course, if you, let's check it out. What happens if we pass a string there? Again, it crashes. Okay, what does L4 do? Think of it, take a moment. Now we will check it out. We pass an integer here and we get back 55, but it's a string, because first we convert the value of x to a string and then we double it. So string multiplication means just append the same string to itself several times. So what happens with a string here? String is string, okay, and then yeah, it works just the same as with numbers. But we can't pass a lambda to it. I mean, that would also be a possibility if we do that. Okay, that's interesting actually. That's the memory location of the lambda. So it did really convert the lambda function to a string. You could pass a function to it, because if you print a function, you get the type and the memory address of the function. So these functions in Python are also objects, so they have to implement the representation method, and then it works. Then you can convert it to string. If an object doesn't have this function, it wouldn't work. But they all have it because they will always return their memory address. Okay, and this last lambda takes a function and calls it. So here I pass a lambda without parameters. We already saw that too. You can create lambdas without any parameters, parameterless lambdas, and this one just returns true. That doesn't really make sense because you could use true simply, but for the sake of this example I used it because now you can call it here and it returns true. If we just pass true here, it crashes because you can't call the value. You can't call a Boolean value. Okay, so now I wanted to show you more advanced lambdas. Until now we only had lambdas with one parameter, but of course you can have several parameters, and then you get a whole list here, comma separated, as you are used to in normal functions too. And you can do something here, for example, return a list containing the values. So here I show you, we get back a list containing our 3 values. Or what else could we do? We could also have a condition. So, for example, we want to return x if y is bigger than z and else we return y plus z. And if we call that, we get back 5. Y, our x is 1, so it's not bigger than, 2 is not bigger than 3, so we get back y plus z, which is 2 plus 3, and that's 5. So here you can see how we can use if-else in a lambda. Remember, you can only have one single line in a lambda. You can't have code with several lines in a lambda. So if you use the one line notation of the if-else, you can use it in a lambda. And we also saw in a previous video that we can use map, how we can use map with a lambda. And inside a lambda, we can also use map to have a loop. If you want to have a loop in a lambda, you can do this with the map function. So, for example, we want to have a list and we want to increment all the values inside the list by 1. So sorry, this must, just to make it clear. So here this lambda takes an element and increments it by 1, and we map this lambda to our input parameter x, and then we return it as a list. So now our lambda expects a list as input, and you see we get back a list with incremented values. So what we did is we looped over the list basically and incremented all the values by 1. So what you should have learned now, we can have lambdas with several parameters. 0 to n is possible. and we can have if-else in a lambda, and also loops if we use the map function. But it must always be one single line. Actually, you shouldn't make lambdas too complicated. If you remember, for example, we can use the max built-in function with a list, and then we can have a key parameter also, and here we pass a lambda which computes the key by which we want to compute the max value. So that's a typical usage of a lambda, and it shouldn't be too long. Yeah, if you have a long lambda here, it's really not readable anymore. It should be a very short function which you want to use once. If not, you can assign a function and declare it before in the regular way, like this. And here's your function. That's also possible, but yeah, keep lambdas short and only if you use them only if you want to use them once, so it's like a throwaway function. Okay, if you have questions, write them in the comments, and I hope you liked the video. See you next time.